In the heart of the river, where roots twist like ancient fingers and shadows whisper across the water, lies a place villagers dare not enter. They say the mangroves breathe at night, that unseen eyes follow your every step, and that those who wander too far never return. This is the mangroves where darkness dwells. Welcome to Tales by Lymarh. Please share, like and subscribe. In a small fishing village by the edge of the Niger Delta, people lived with both gratitude and fear of the great river. The waters provided fish, crabs, and oysters, but there was one part of the river no one dared approach, the mangroves of Abaruku. Children were warned never to wander there. Elders whispered of strange lights that danced between the tangled roots at night, of voices that lured fishermen deeper until their boats drifted back empty at dawn. Mothers told stories of a curse, that long ago, a greedy king tried to cut down the sacred mangroves for timber, and the spirits of the forest swallowed him whole. Yet, among the villagers, curiosity grew. Not everyone believed. Young people scoffed, laughing that it was only fear keeping their parents away. And among them was a boy named Onyedika, restless, sharp-eyed, and hungry for adventure. One night, standing by the riverbank with his best friend Chuka, Onyedika whispered, "Why fear a place because of old stories? What if treasures lie within those roots? What if the spirits are nothing but tales to keep us in chains?" Chuka shivered. "My mother says the mangroves are alive. That they take what they want and never return it." But Onyedika smiled, reckless and daring. "Then let us see for ourselves." And so, the seeds of a dangerous journey were planted. The night Onyedika chose was dark, the moon hidden behind swollen clouds. The air smelled of rain and salt. Crickets hummed their warnings, but he ignored them, pushing a small canoe into the water. Chuka hesitated at the shore, clutching the amulet his grandmother had given him. "Don't go," he pleaded. "Even the crocodiles avoid that place." But Onyedika only laughed. "Fear feeds on silence. Tonight, I will break it." With a single paddle stroke, he pushed off into the current. The water seemed heavier here, thick and sluggish, pulling him toward the mangrove roots that jutted like blackened teeth from the river. As he drifted closer, he noticed something strange. The air grew colder, though it was the peak of the humid season. Then came the whispers, soft at first, like wind rustling through reeds. But as he entered deeper, they grew clearer, sharper, as if voices were calling his name. "Onyedika." His breath caught. No one should know him here. His paddle shook in his hand, yet curiosity forced him onward. Shadows flickered in the water. Shapes moved between the roots, too quick to be fish, too fluid to be human. The deeper he went, the more the mangroves seemed to close in, their branches knitting overhead like the ceiling of a cave. Then suddenly, silence. Even the insects stopped. Even the river held its breath. That was when he saw it, two faint glowing eyes watching him from between the roots. At first, Onyedika thought it was an animal. But no creature he knew had eyes like that, amber flames glowing without reflection. The figure shifted, tall and twisted, its form half man, half tree, bark like skin glistening with river slime. Its voice was deep, echoing like wood splitting in a fire. "Why do you enter where the living are forbidden?" Onyedika's mouth went dry. His heart pounded, but his pride held him steady. "I came to see for myself. To know if the stories are true." The being tilted its head. "Then you shall see." The roots around him began to move, curling like snakes, tightening around the canoe. The river stirred, pulling him deeper, though he did not paddle. The whispers grew louder, this time screaming, wailing, countless voices of the lost echoing all around him. And in that moment, Onyedika realized the mangroves were not just trees. They were alive, ancient, and hungry. The keeper leaned closer, its glowing eyes piercing him. "Every soul that dares this place must leave something behind. What will you give, boy?" Onyedika clutched the paddle, his mind racing. Would he surrender his boat? His blood? His very life? The darkness of the mangroves seemed to wait, eager for his answer. And just as he opened his mouth, something in the shadows moved behind him. The keeper's eyes smoldered like coal under rain. The mangrove roots held the canoe in a patient, tightening cradle. The river wore a mask of black glass, no ripple, no wind, no cricket cry dared to disturb it. Every soul that dares this place must leave something behind, the keeper repeated, voice falling like a heavy log split in a silent forest. Life owes a toll. What will you give? Onyedika swallowed. The paddle felt heavier than wood, heavier than his own courage. He thought of his mother's calloused hands washing fish scales into the evening, of Chuka's anxious eyes at the shore, of the village that mocked fear and yet never crossed this line. Take my boat, he said. The keeper tilted its head, bark creaking. Timber is not currency here. My blood, then, Onyedika blurted, desperate bravado leaking into fear. If pain is the price. The roots rustled with something like laughter, dry, papery, sickening. Blood is common. We drink memory. A breath of cold pressed into his bones. Your first laughter, the keeper said, or your first grief. The flavor of your childhood river, the sound of your name when it was still new. Memory, boy. Which will you leave to the water, asterisk asterisk. The canoe shifted an inch. Onyedika felt a pressure in his chest like unseen fingers around his lungs. His mind flashed to a little boy on a mud bank, feet in the river, his mother pretending to be a fish and splashing him until they laughed so hard they fell into the shallow brown water together. That laughter had been a bridge out of hunger and worry, a small, bright thing that made the world livable. If he gave that up, would he still know who he was? His eyes burned. What happens if I refuse? The keeper's mouth, if it could be called that, curled. The water blackened further, its sheen erasing even the reflection of the trapped canoe. All at once, Onyedika saw shapes beneath, bracelets, clay bowls, a rust-eaten fishing hook, and a carved mask of ancient bronze, half-buried, watching him with dead patience. Above those relics, the pale smears of faces, men, women, children, blurred like whispers underwater. Refusal is a choice, the keeper said, but choices make currents. You will still pay, with unknowing. The river will strip your path until you walk in circles. Your life will go on, but without the door you were supposed to open. Onyedika shook, anger flaring through fear. Why? Why do you hold what you did not make? A soft wind passed like a breath that wasn't wind at all. From the thicket, a second voice, lilting, almost kind, spoke from nowhere and everywhere. Because men do not keep promises. You took first, it whispered. We learned. Onyedika's throat tightened. In the stillness, he felt it, the mangroves were not a prison, they were a ledger. Debts. Oaths. Names. He closed his eyes. Rivers teach. Pride drowns. Take my first pride, he said finally, voice raw. The moment I thought myself bigger than my mother's warnings. Take the taste of that foolishness. Silence hung. The keeper studied him. Pride is a good spice, it said, almost amused. But the bargain must bind. Offer what costs you shape. Onyedika's jaw clenched. He thought of laughter again, and grief. The grief, rain drumming on a zinc roof as his father's canoe drifted back empty one season long ago, the day he learned absence had a sound. That grief had carved him into a boy who feared being small. That grief made him brave and reckless. He lifted his head. Take half of my first laughter, he said hoarsely, and half of my first grief. Leave me enough to be human. Take the rest to pay the river for the arrogance that brought me here. The mangrove roots stilled, listening. The second voice sighed like water easing back into banks. He divides his portion, it murmured. Clever. Pain without breaking. joy without forgetting. The keeper extended a limb. It hovered above Onyedika's chest and lowered. A coolness slid into him. For an instant, he saw the night his father didn't return, and the memory's edge dulled, still sharp, but no longer able to cut bone. He saw his mother's water fight, its laughter softened, like a drum wrapped in cloth. He gasped, both lighter and emptier. The roots loosened a fraction. "You may enter," the keeper said, "but you will not walk alone." Something knocked the canoe, twice, gentle. Onyedika turned. A string of fireflies formed a line, dim pale beads hovering just above the water, hemming a path deeper into the mangroves. Beyond them, he saw a faint, impossible glow like moonlight trapped in a jar. "Follow," the keeper breathed. "And mind the calls that sound like people you love. Echoes borrow familiar skins." The canoe drifted forward without paddling, as if the river had taken his decision into its hands. The branches overhead knit tighter, turning the world into a narrow throat of wood and water. Onyedika gripped the gunwale, eyes fixed on the slight glow ahead, as soft voices rose behind him, his mother's, his father's, Chuka's, each saying his name in a way that made him ache to turn around. He clenched his teeth and stared forward. Pride was lighter now. Fear had edges. The ledger had a page with his name on it, and it wasn't finished. Back at the village shore, Chuka paced a groove into wet sand. Wind roughed the river skin, and lanterns along the huts threw tired halos in the dusk. He could not see the canoe anymore, only a darker darkness where the mangroves began. He clutched his grandmother's amulet, a small circle of cowries threaded into raffia, bound to a carved sliver of Irako wood etched with tiny marks. She had pressed it into his palm once, saying, "When you cannot outshout fear, outsing it." Rivers remember songs. Chuka didn't feel brave. He felt responsible. He had let Onyedika go. That was a kind of silence that tasted like guilt. He ran to the old shrine at the village edge, a low clay mound bristling with palm fronds, bits of chalk, a small gourd sealed with red thread. The shrine keeper, Mangroves, sat beside it with a wrapper tied high and eyes that seemed to have listened to more midnights than anyone else alive. "You're looking for a debt," she said before he spoke. Chuka froze. "He went in," he whispered. "I tried to stop him. Now I can't feel his path. It's like the river swallowed him." Mangroves dipped a clean stick into white chalk and made a slow spiral on the clay. "The mangroves are a market where oaths are traded. Your friend is bargaining. If you go after him, don't carry a blade or a boast. Carry a song." "I don't know." "The river songs," Chuka admitted, cheeks hot. "You know heartbeat?" she asked. "You know breath?" She lifted the gourd, weighed it, then handed him something instead, a small calabash bowl with a lid stitched from dried palm. "There is a light inside. Not a flame. Truth. Do not open it where lies are thick, or the truth will dim. Open it when the river asks you who you are." Chuka stared. What if the river asks for more than truth? "It always does," Mangroves said, a sad smile gathering at her mouth. "But truth is the only thing that doesn't drown when you drop it." She pressed a cowrie into his hand. "When the water calls you by your nickname, don't answer. Names are hooks." He nodded, swallowed, and pushed a light canoe into the water. The night nuzzled his neck, heavy and damp. He kept the amulet around his wrist, the calabash tucked under his shirt, the paddle dipping slow so noise would be a choice and not an accident. As he reached the border where reeds thinned and mangrove roots rose like ribs, the world grew quiet. Crickets paused. Even his own breath seemed to move more carefully. Then, a voice. "Choo-choo," it sang softly. No one had called him that since he was 7, since his sister teased him for being afraid of lizards. The voice wore her warmth perfectly. The canoe drifted. His hands trembled. He shut his eyes and sang. It started ugly, a threadbare hum with no tune, just breath mapped to heartbeat. He shaped it like a lullaby he barely remembered his mother humming when the oil lamp burned low. Hum became syllables. Syllables stitched into words. Words became names, not his own, but the rivers, Omambala, Nun, Ethiop, Folktales, names he'd learned listening to elders, names water wore long before the village built nets. The air changed. The roots' shadows loosened a little. The river seemed to take a deeper breath. Chuka, his sister's voice said, sticks snapping softly in the sound. I am cold. Paddle faster. He sang louder, knocking fear off his tongue like mud. He sang the proverbs, water that forgets its source dries at the sun. He sang the old warning, if you laugh at the crocodile's teeth, don't complain when your paddle comes back shorter. The tune didn't matter. The insistence did. The whisper thinned, then retreated, rasping like a bat wing. The canoe slid forward, past the first curtain of roots. Ahead, a flicker like fireflies drew a path, a necklace of pale light that seemed to breathe with the river. He followed it deeper. The mangroves became architecture, pillars and vaults, a cathedral built of wood and silence. In a small clearing, he saw it, Onyedika's canoe, snagged among roots as if a giant hand pinched it. Onyedika sat in it, eyes open but distant, lips moving as if arguing with someone he alone could hear. Chuka pulled alongside. Na Ani, he whispered, voice breaking. I came. Onyedika's focus sharpened, surprise and shame shadowing his face. You shouldn't have. I tried not to. Chuka said honestly. I failed. The water between the canoes puckered. Roots stirred. The keeper unfolded from the trunk behind Onyedika, taller now, more defined, a crown of leafless twigs haloed its bark skull. 2 debts, the keeper said, amused. A duet. Chuka's instinct screamed to bow. He did. We came to return what was taken, he said, hands open on his knees. If the ledger holds our names, tell us the line. Ah, the keeper whispered. Return. A word that tastes right. From the dark, the second voice drifted, sadder now. You built your village with timber from this edge. You pulled crabs from the roots without the song of asking. You laughed at the counsel of those who remembered the bargain. When the greedy king cut, we swallowed his path, but others kept cutting in small ways that do not make stories, only holes. Onyedika licked his lips. What is the bargain? 3 tides, the keeper responded. Silence, truth, sacrifice. Pass them, and the water will restore what must be restored. Chuka nodded once. How? The first tide, silence. Hear what the mangroves hear, and do not speak, even to comfort yourselves, until the tide turns. If you speak, you drown in echoes. Chuka glanced at Onyedika, who gave a tight nod. They settled. The world shifted into listening. At first there was almost nothing, just the thud of blood in ears. Then layers revealed themselves, tiny pops of shrimp in silt, the scrape of a crab somewhere behind them, a murmur like a grandmother praying in the next room. Underneath, deeper, names rolled along the riverbed, each syllable a small stone, smoothed by water. The names weren't human. They were the roots' names for themselves, unrelated to tongue, older than teeth. The urge to whisper rose, do you hear that? But they held fast. A minute stretched like an hour. An hour stretched like a story your elders forbid but your cousin tells anyway. Somewhere, something understood that they were listening properly, and the mangroves relaxed a hair. The air lifted. The water blinked, yes, blinked, as if woken. A soft boom thrummed. Tide turned. The keeper's bark mouth cracked in approval. The first tide keeps you. Second tide, truth, the softer voice said, closer now, as if sitting between their boats. Not the truth you tell others. The truth you hide from yourself. Speak it. If it is clean, the calabash you carry will hold it. If it is crooked, the calabash will drown it. Chuka's hand flew to his chest. He had forgotten the calabash, forgotten that he had not told Onyedika he carried it. He looked at his friend. Onyedika looked back, eyes wary and brave at once. Onyedika spoke first, voice low. I came because I am tired of being small. When my father didn't return, something in me decided that caution is a thief. I pretend bravery for the village, but I am mostly angry that the river chose us for loss. I wanted to take something back. Even if it hurt someone else. The words hung like lanterns. Chuka. Chuka eased the calabash lid open a finger's width. Inside, not flame, but a soft cool radiance gathered, brighter as Onyedika spoke. The light did not flicker. It steadied. Chuka swallowed. His turn. I pretend I fear the river, he said, voice shaking, but I fear being the friend who stays behind more. I let you go because if you became legend, would be the boy who begged you not to. I would be storyless. I wanted to be in your shadow instead of my own light. I came because I cannot stand the taste of cowardice in my mouth. The calabash brightened more, suffusing the space with a gentle glow that made the roots look less like teeth and more like fingers interlaced in prayer. The water exhaled. The second tide keeps you, the keeper said, and, for the first time, its voice lacked mockery. Third tide, sacrifice, the softer voice said. Return what was stolen. But listen, returning is not only objects. It is honor. It is names. It is paths. From beneath, something shifted. The bronze mask Onyedika had glimpsed before wriggled up from the silt and floated, heavy and impossible, between the boats. It was beautiful and terrible, cheeks etched with swirls like river eddies, eyes empty but watching. Carved into its brow in tiny script were words Onyedika could not read, but the river could, a vow that a king long ago had made to keep the sacred shade of the mangroves untouched. Chuka felt the weight of history. He looked at Onyedika. Onyedika looked at the amulet on Chuka's wrist. I won't take your grandmother's protection, Onyedika said, reading his friend's thought as if his mouth had formed it. That's not sacrifice. That's foolishness. Chuka lifted the calabash, palms sweating. Then we give what made us walk wrong. He met Onyedika's eyes. Onyedika nodded slowly. I give my hunger to be legend, Chuka said, tears surprising him. Take it. Leave me with a hunger to be good. Onyedika touched the edge of the bronze mask, grimaced at the chill that leapt into his bones. I give my right to walk without asking, he whispered. When I take from this place, fish, wood, a story, I will ask. I will sing. If I cannot pay, I will go hungry. They lowered the calabash's light toward the mask. The glow flowed into the bronze, nestling into the etched vow, making the words shine briefly, then sink like a seed collapsing into soil. The river rumbled. The tide turned with a sound like a giant animal rolling in sleep. The third tide keeps you, the keeper said, voice softer. One debt remains, not yours. A child's laugh, thin, stuttering, skittered across the water behind them. Both boys turned sharply. At the edge of the light, a figure hovered between roots, a small girl, hair tied with andanda raffia, eyes wide as if doors had never been taught to close. Her wrapper clung soggy around her knees. She did not breathe. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish remembering air. My name is Ifeoma, she said, though her lips barely moved. I followed my brother into the mangroves last harmattan. He ran when the whisper said our mother's pot was burning. I tried to call him. The water took my voice and my feet. Onyedika felt his stomach drop. Chuka's knuckles whitened around the calabash. The second voice, the one like cool hands over fever, spoke from everywhere at once. When your elders sang, they left no space for this one. Return her name to the village, and the river will let her path go. Onyedika's eyes stung. He opened his mouth to answer then shut it, remembering the first tide. He turned to Chuka, who understood. Not words, deeds. Chuka extended the calabash toward Ifeoma. We will carry your name back, he said simply. But the river must let you walk. The light flickered, then steadied. The girl reached, fingers passing through the glow, curling like smoke, then firming, just a little. Her feet found purchase on a root. She stood, trembling. Do not promise if you cannot carry, the keeper warned, a hint of bark laughter returning. Names are stones. Your backs are not wide. Chuka's back ached suddenly, the invisible weight of a name he had agreed to haul. Onyedika's breath shortened as if a rope cinched his ribs. Ifeoma's eyes brightened. Go, the softer voice urged. Tide is turning to teeth again. The path out should have been simple, follow the pale fireflies back, keep the song in your chest, close your mouth to echoes. But the mangroves are honest in one way, they never let a journey end tidily when a lesson is still wet. They pushed off, the two canoes nudging side by side, Ifeoma standing precariously in Onyedika's, hands gripping a root-warped branch as if afraid the water would correct itself and forget to hold her again. The fireflies hovered, then darted. The boys followed. The air grew denser. Sound returned in layers, distant frogs, the slap of something heavy in the dark, voices rising where there should be none. Chuka, a man's voice said just to his left, worn kindly by years and smoke. My son. Don't leave a child with strangers. Bring her to me. Chuka's breath shuddered. It sounded exactly like his father, alive, contrite, the way he wished he had been. He kept his paddle moving, humming under his breath. The amulet ticked against his wrist with every stroke like a tiny drum. Onyedika, a woman's voice called from behind, a perfect, pure copy of his mother, with the small lilt she had when trying not to cry. My child. You left without a prayer. Come, let me wash your feet. Onyedika stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Ifeoma wobbled, gaze snapping to the sound. For an instant, she looked 7 again, new grief frowning her mouth. Mama, she whispered. Onyedika reached without looking and squeezed her hand. His voice stayed low, careful not to feed the river with excess sound. Forward. They slipped through a gate of roots that had not been there before. The world on the other side brightened slightly, not daylight, but a palette of less black. The fireflies hovered uncertainly, then rushed on. The water beneath them changed temperature, colder now, as if they had crossed a seam of memory laid by a different season. Beneath, a procession appeared, not bodies, not objects, but impressions of debts drifting like schools of fish. A woman handing a basket of oysters to the air and receiving a sickness instead. A boy cutting a young mangrove for a slingshot and then limping for a year. A chief blessing a logging expedition with a prayer he did not believe in, then weeping over a child swallowed by tide. Chuka felt the weight on his shoulders multiply. Ifeoma's name sat solid across his spine. Behind it, something heavier pressed, the village's habit of forgetting to ask. He thought of the shrine no one visited except when fish were scarce or children were sick. He thought of laughter snipped short when elders spoke of old rules. I can't carry this, he hissed without meaning to. The canoe rocked. The keeper's voice drifted from far and near at once, polite as a teacher who wants you to notice the answer yourself. One carries what is his. You picked up a stone, now choose where to place it. Chuka looked at the calabash. The lid was warm. He cracked it open. Light kissed his face. The weight eased the way a yoke eases when you bend and find the right angle. Truth belongs to the middle, he whispered, realization blooming. Not on my back. Between us. He lifted the calabash high. The glow widened, bathing both canoes, painting Ifeoma's face with a softness that made her look more possible. Onyedika felt the shift too, the weight sliding from his chest to the space he shared with Chuka and Ifeoma. Community, held like a bowl. The path ahead sharpened. Fireflies steadied. The mangroves, however, disliked neatness. One more test waited where the roots thickened into a weave so dense that water ran in threads rather than channels. The canoes stuck. They had reached the place where stories say the river teeth begin. Here, the softer voice said, regretful. To pass, one leaves what he does not need. Onyedika blinked. What did he not need? He looked at his paddle, at his pride, already tithed, at his hunger to be the boy who returned with a tail sharp enough to cut envy. He looked at Chuka, whom he loved as a brother but also measured himself against like a rival. He met Chuka's eyes. Chuka, without words, nodded. I don't need to be first, Onyedika said, surprise loosening something inside him. I don't need to be the one who saved Ifeoma. Let the story say we did. The mangrove weave shivered, a thread loosening. Chuka swallowed. I don't need to be the one who almost stayed behind. I don't need to carry the shame of my fear. Fear walked with me, it did not paddle. Let the story say I was afraid and faithful. Another thread eased. Ifeoma's small voice, barely more than breath, I don't need to remain the girl who vanished. Let me be the girl who returned. The weave loosened enough for water to gather into a single, narrow throat. The canoes jerked forward like fish freed from a net. Mind the last lie, the keeper called, almost tender. It is the one the river tells when it doesn't want to be alone. What lie? Onyedika asked before he could stop himself. The world brightened, too bright, wrong bright, like noon poured into midnight. The canopy thinned, and beyond it, the village appeared, lanterns, the jetty, Mangroves at the shrine, Onyedika's mother wringing her wrapper in panic, Chuka's father at the waterline, arms open. Onyedika's heart leapt against his ribs hard enough to hurt. Ifeoma sobbed. Chuka's jaw shook. The river is generous, the vision cooed. What is a shortcut between friends? Onyedika's fingers dug furrows into the canoe. Every part of him wanted to leap, to paddle, to shout, to end it. He could sprint into his mother's arms, press Ifeoma into her mother's, let himself collapse onto the sand and laugh. He could skip the last terrifying, small bit of dark water that remained and pretend the mangroves had always meant well. Chuka lifted the calabash high. The light inside dimmed. Truth does not like lies that wear kindness. Mangroves said, Chuka whispered, voice thin to a thread, open it when the river asks who you are. He opened the calabash wide. Light did not blaze. It settled, cool, patient, like evening descending on a busy day. It washed over the false village and peeled it like old paint. The lanterns bled into darkness, the jetty melted into a root, the figures became fog, then nothing. The canopy lowered again, honest and tangled. The river hissed, soft, resentful, then relieved. I am Chuka, he said to the dark, with fear and with song. I am Onyedika, Onyedika said, with grief and with pride, both tied short. I am Ifeoma, the girl whispered, tiny but sure, with a name that goes home. The path clarified. The fireflies linked into a straight, glowing line pointing toward water that knew the village by smell. The canoes eased forward, freeing of their own accord as if the river had decided it was tired of holding its breath. Behind them, far back where the bronze mask had sunk, the water made a small sound, the sound a bowl makes when placed on a mat after being washed. A sound of something restored to where it belonged. Go, the softer voice said one last time, fading like a night breeze when dawn thinks about beginning. Remember to ask when you take. Sing even if your voice is ugly. And if you forget, the mangroves will remember, so you don't drown in stories that only make you feel big. They did not paddle fast. They did not need to. The river carried them, curious now, almost eager to tell the village what it had witnessed, two boys and a girl unbinding themselves by letting go of what made them feel tall. At the mouth where mangrove roots pulled back like fingers opening, Chuka turned. In the gloom, the keeper stood, no longer monstrous, just tall, very old, and very tired, like a tree that had survived more harm than rain. For a heartbeat, it lifted a hand in a gesture that might have been benediction or might have been wind. Onyedika bowed from the waist. Not low. Low enough. The river let them pass. The canoes broke free of the last roots and drifted into open water. The night sky stretched wide again, black as fresh palm oil with pinpricks of stars glittering like cowries. The air smelled different, lighter, touched with smoke from the village fires. Onyedika's chest tightened at the sight. For a moment, he wanted to throw his paddle aside and leap into the river like a child racing home after punishment. But he remembered the keeper's warning, ask when you take. He bowed his head toward the mangroves, whispering, I borrowed your path. I return it. Beside him, Chuka hummed softly, weaving the river's names into a tune that had no beginning or end. Ifeoma sat quietly, her small hand gripping the gunwale, wide eyes drinking the stars as if she had not seen them in 100 years. As the canoes touched the sandy bank, lantern light from the huts spilled across the water. A hush fell over the gathered villagers. They had seen the boys enter hours earlier. No one expected them to return, and certainly not with a girl the river had claimed seasons ago. Gasps erupted. Some covered their mouths. Others dropped to their knees, whispering prayers. Onyedika's mother ran forward, tears streaming, pulling her son into her arms so tightly he could not breathe. Chuka's father, stiff with shame at past absences, pressed both hands on his boy's shoulders, murmuring words no one heard. But the loudest cry came from a woman at the edge of the crowd. She staggered forward, wrapper loose, hair untidy from grief's neglect. Her eyes locked on Ifeoma, and the girl broke into sobs. Mama! The woman fell to the ground, clutching her child, kissing her face again and again as if afraid she would dissolve into water. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Such returns did not happen. Names swallowed by the mangroves rarely came back whole. Something had shifted in the order of things. Mamankem, the shrine keeper, raised her staff and spoke. The river has written a new story. But stories are debts unless sealed. Bring them to the shrine. The villagers followed in a procession lit by lanterns and fear. The clay mound of the shrine glowed faintly in the firelight. Palm fronds swayed though no wind touched them. Mamankem stood before it, chalk in one hand, her staff in the other. 3 tides they crossed, she said, her voice carrying like a drumbeat. Silence. Truth. Sacrifice. Now the 4th tide, naming, must bind the story or it will unravel into curses. She turned to the boys. Speak the name that must be returned. Chuka and Onyedika looked at each other. Ifeoma stood between them, eyes wet but steady. Together, they said, Ifeoma. The crowd repeated it softly, the louder, Ifeoma. The name rolled through the night, carried on voices until even the mangroves at the river edge seemed to lean closer, listening. Mamankem marked a spiral on the clay mound. She placed the bronze mask, retrieved earlier by fishermen at dawn, before the shrine. The vow is remembered, she said. But memory alone is not enough. She turned to the crowd. Who will ask forgiveness for all we have taken without asking? Silence hung heavy. The villagers shifted uncomfortably, ashamed. At last, Onyedika stepped forward. His voice shook, but he lifted it anyway. I mocked fear. I thought caution was weakness. But I have seen what happens when we take without asking. The river keeps the ledger. From this day, when I fish, I will sing. When I cut wood, I will pour palm wine and beg permission. If I forget, may the river remember for me. Chuka stepped beside him. And I will remind those who forget. Even if they laugh. even if they call me coward." The villagers murmured. Mamankem nodded, but her eyes gleamed. "Good. But words must be carried on breath. All of you, sing." She began a chant, low and deep, naming the river and its gifts. Hesitantly, voices joined, first children, then women, then men. Soon the whole village sang, their voices rising like a tide, weaving gratitude into the night. For the first time in living memory, the mangroves did not whisper back with hunger. They whispered with listening. Days passed. The story spread like fire through palm fronds. Other villages whispered about the boy who faced the keeper, the friend who sang, and the girl who returned from the dead. But not all were pleased. One evening, a man named Ifeoma arrived at the riverbank. He was a trader, greedy and ambitious, who had long planned to cut the mangroves for timber to sell to foreign merchants. The tale of the boy's return only angered him. "Stories make fools of strong men," he scoffed, axe gleaming in the firelight. "Trees are trees. Fear is how elders keep us poor." Onyedika, standing nearby, felt the river stir uneasily. He stepped forward. "Don't do this. We barely left alive. The mangroves are not just trees." Ifeoma sneered. "And who made you the river's mouthpiece? A boy who wandered and came back trembling?" The crowd murmured. Fear and doubt rippled through them. Chuka clutched the amulet, heart pounding. Ifeoma, watching, pressed close to her mother. Ifeoma raised his axe. "Tonight I'll show you the truth. When nothing happens, you'll see I am right." He stepped into the water, laughing, the axe balanced on his shoulder. The river's surface stilled. Even the frogs grew silent. Onyedika shouted, "Sing!" The villagers hesitated. Ifeoma laughed louder. He swung the axe toward a root. Before metal touched wood, the river opened. A wave surged, not water, but shadows shaped like roots. They wrapped his arms, legs, and throat, dragging him down with a soundless speed. His scream bubbled once, then vanished. The river smoothed as if nothing had happened. The crowd froze in horror. Onyedika lifted his chin. "The river remembers. Will you?" Slowly, voices rose again in song, this time stronger, more urgent, as if to drown the memory of what they had just witnessed. Mamankem lifted her staff high. "The ledger is balanced for now," she declared. "But only if we keep singing." The village did not forget that night. For weeks after Ifeoma's disappearance, no one dared fish or cut wood without first singing by the river. Mothers taught their children short chants of gratitude. Fathers poured libations of palm wine before casting nets. Even laughter by the riverbank carried an undertone of reverence. Onyedika and Chuka walked with new weight on their shoulders. They were no longer reckless boys, but keepers of a lesson larger than themselves. Wherever they went, people pointed, some in awe, some in fear. But the two friends only reminded each other, it was not us. It was the river. We only remembered to listen. Ifeoma grew strong again, her presence in the village a living miracle. Whenever children mocked or doubted, she would lift her chin and whisper, "The river keeps names. Don't let it keep yours." Her survival became the cautionary proverb mothers told at dusk. And the mangroves? They remained dark, eerie, and unyielding. Their roots twisted deeper, their whispers traveled farther, but something had shifted. They no longer hungered the way they once did. They had been heard, their ledger balanced, at least for now. Yet on some nights, when the moon was low and the air was heavy, villagers swore they could still hear the faint cry of an axe sinking in water, and a man's voice begging too late for mercy. The mangroves where darkness dwells had not lost their teeth. They had simply reminded the world that fear and respect are twins, and that forgetting either is how stories turn into graves. Moral of the story: the mangroves teach us this. Respect is the true bridge between man and nature. When we take without asking, the debt always returns. Pride blinds, but humility protects. Onyedika's arrogance nearly drowned him, but his humility saved not just himself, but others. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is carrying fear honestly. Chuka was terrified, yet his song kept the current steady. Names and promises live longer than flesh. To forget them is to be swallowed by silence. In life, we are all borrowers, from the land, from the waters, from the trust of those who came before. The question is not whether we will pay, but and so, the mangroves still stand, their roots twisting in the dark waters, waiting for the next soul foolish, or bold, enough to test them. Tell me, would you dare to paddle into the shadows where even echoes have teeth? Or would you sing your way back to safety? Let me know your answer in the comments. I'm eager to hear. Thank you for watching Tales by Lymarh, where African folktales, mysteries, and timeless lessons come alive. If this story gripped your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe so more people can journey with us into the deep rivers and darker forests of our heritage. Turn on notifications so you never miss another tale, because every week, we bring you stories that are haunting, powerful, and unforgettable. Until next time, keep your voices strong, keep your promises true, and remember, some places don't just tell stories, they keep them.